just showed you. Here is the 500 cubit square, which would be 8x on either side. The value of x is 62.5 cubits, which is related to the size of the altar and the ramp going up to it. You see, the different dimensions that are in the temple are all in this pattern. It's a constant repetition of numbers of cubit size that keep showing up. For example, 11 cubits, which is a number that keeps showing up in dimensions of different courts. It's all here. It's all here. I'm not going to put it on this clip, but when I go into detail, I'll show you how all these numbers are in these patterns. So here's the court of the women. Here is the court of the Azara. This is the axis line. And this point marked whole is the exact center of the Azara. And there's a point here marked F, which is very important also, which I'll explain in a minute. We can easily find what the center of the Azara is, what the center of the court of the women is. You just take the numbers and divide them in half. So if this is 135 cubits, the halfway point would be 67.5 cubits and 67.5 cubits. So this point is 67.5 cubits. This is 67.5 cubits. If this is 187 cubits, this is 93.5 cubits to here, 97.5 cubits to here. And that center point is marked whole. Why do I call it whole? Well, in the temple and in the Dome of the Rock, there's a hole in the rock in the ceiling of the cave. Remember we talked about a cave? There is a hole in the cave. And that's exactly where that point is. So that hole was cut out at the exact center of the Azara according to the mathematics that I'm showing. Now, if we take the distance, in other words, that's an archaeological feature that was very significant today as well as in the past. That hole is a key to understanding where the temple was. So remember I talked about the axis line? Well, the axis line touches the hole, the northern edge of the hole exactly. The bend in the rock and in the fence, or at a right angle, goes exactly to where the hole is located, on the axis line of the Jewish temple. If we take this distance, the Azara distance, and we add the court of the women distance, and we find the exact center of this whole rectangle, it's point F. That's the point F. And when we add all the features of the temple, with the altar's location and everything is taken into account, that point is exactly 4 cubits from the northeast corner of the altar. Remember, 4 cubits. The reason that number is important is that in the ancient writings, the number of 4 cubits has great significance, because the altar was originally a square, and that they added 4 cubits to the west side and 4 cubits to the south side. So we're seeing, this is not mentioned in the Talmud, or the ancient writings, but it's the same number of 4 cubits added to the center point of the great square. And when you get all these relationships occurring with these similar sizes and similar numbers, it's starting to show that there is a pattern that the ancients who were working on the temple were making use of. Sacred mathematics or sacred geometry. This is all about sacred geometry. Now I'm going to add another picture to the board. Here you can see the square, as we had before. Here is the Azara, exactly to scale. Here is the hole location in the center of the Azara. And I take the areas to the south, to the east, to the north, and to the west. You'll notice that the area to the south is the largest part, or where there's the most service. This would be where there was the most service, was to the south. The area to the east is smaller. The area to the north is smaller. And the very smallest part is to the west. And that's exactly what the Talmud says the areas were. Largest to the south, smaller to the east, smaller to the north, smallest to the west. These are areas, not linear dimensions. And the use of the description of a area is closer to what the Talmud is actually saying, that it's describing areas of ground where the people are walking around rather than a linear dimension. Because of the linear dimension, it could be very long but very narrow. There are writings from the Middle Ages that describe linear dimensions, but the Talmud seems to be describing areas of the ground, and this is closer to what the Talmud is saying. This also is in agreement to what Josephus is saying, that the western edge was close. The area to the west was the smallest area, and you can see this here as well. Now, there is a tiny little cave in a cistern that's H-shaped, which is located here on this scale drawing. And if we made a right angle, that is, if the ancients, what I'm showing is what the ancients could have been doing. A right angle to the western scarp, there's the L like we saw before. It's also parallel to this side of the square. This is there's a wall there now. This is the eastern wall. And we make a line parallel. This is the line parallel. We can make a triangle. We can make triangles from every corner. We can actually make a total of 8 triangles. These are identical triangles to the one I just showed you. Instead of making the triangle from point A, we're making it from this corner. And there's the triangle drawn out. There's the triangle as the dotted line. So this is the mirror image of the triangle we had before. Now the point where the triangle intersects the right angle line, the line, is the point marked Q. So there's Q right there. And Q is a very important point. If we measure the distance from Q to the halfway point, this is the halfway line. This is a halfway line going east to west. This is north to south. V is the exact center of the square. The distance from Q to the line here, this line here, is 135 cubits. If we go from Q down this way, we can make 135 cubits also. That is, remember our center line, the axis line CL? Well, from here to CL equals the distance from CL to that point. So this is 67.5 cubits to the center line, plus 67.5 cubits to the bottom. So we can make a perfect square here from this halfway line. The Talmud says that the court of the women was a square of 135 cubits. That's exactly what this is. A perfect square of 135 cubits. Now remember how I showed the squares laid out into 8 parts? And that if we take 3 of those parts, that would be 3x. That would be 3 times 62.5, which is 187.5 cubits. So from the halfway line to here is 187.5 cubits. If we drop down, we have 135 cubits. So we have a rectangle formed from the halfway line. That's 187.5 cubits from east to west, and 135 cubits from north to south. Now, as we go through this, you'll see that they don't use half cubits. They go to whole numbers. So we would go in from this point a half a cubit, or 187 cubits. Not 187.5 cubits, but 187 cubits. A half a cubit is about 7 inches. So we were going in just about 7 inches approximately, going this way. The Talmud says that the inner temple was in a rectangle, 187 cubits from east to west, and 135 cubits from north to south, which is exactly what that is. And with the court of the women to the east, 135 cubits square. Where's our center line? So that point right there would be the location, the center line running through the Canar's Gate, which was the eastern gate into the court of the Azara. So this is the Azara. The Azara is the inner court. So this is showing that these details of the temple are being worked out from 2 natural caves. There are 2 natural caves and a natural rock face.